Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for attending my session. It's very early. Okay, so the title of my presentation is Establishing an Extensive Reading Program in Chinese as a Foreign Language Context, Reading Attitude, Language Abilities, and ER Activities. I think right now in the field, right, a lot of studies, a lot of your projects are conducted in EFL or ESL contexts. There are some studies, there are some ER programs established in less commonly taught languages. I personally, I hope there will be more. So first, as we all know, extensive reading research has been showing that it has benefited out to readers in different ways. Okay. On the slide, there are a list of publications or studies showing that extensive reading is beneficial. Okay, for example, in EFL readers, extensive reading ER benefited or improved EFL readers' motivation and self-confidence. In a study I conducted with Dr. Day, which was published in Reading in a Foreign Language in 2021, it shows that extensive reading using X-Reading Library, so online library, improved students' reading attitude. In a recent publication, Bui and McAllister 2021, extensive reading has improved readers' reading fluency by 90%. Okay. There are other studies that have shown ER improved vocabulary knowledge, grammar knowledge, writing ability, and reading comprehension. So since one of the focus of my study is reading attitude, so I'll briefly talk about reading attitude. So attitude is a complex and hypothetical construct, okay, whose general definition may include some notion of evaluation. Okay? So positive reading attitude or negative reading attitude. And in a very early study, Alexander and Fehler, 1976, reading attitude was defined as a system of feelings related to reading, which causes the learner to approach or avoid a reading situation. So this is something special about reading attitude or attitude in general. If the reading attitude can motivate students to do an action or avoid doing an action. And according to Day and Banford, 1998, a feature of reading attitude is that they're subject to change. So if the context changes, right? If the teacher do something, if the students do something, their reading attitudes might be changed or altered. Through the reviewing of the current literature, I think there are two approaches to approach reading attitude. One approach is view reading attitude as one entity. However, there is another approach that view reading attitude from a component viewpoint. By components, usually researchers conduct factorial analysis to see what kind of components are there in the reading attitudes. I will give two examples. So Reeve 2002 defined reading attitude by three components. They're cognitive, affective, and cognitive. Okay. So cognitive is the action, readiness, and behavior intentions. Cognitive is personal and evaluative beliefs, and affective is feelings or emotions. Another researcher, Yamashita, also studied reading attitude, analyzed a group of students' reading attitude using a component approach. In this study at Yamashita 2007, the author identified 5 components of reading attitude: their comfort, intellectual value, practical value, anxiety, and linguistic value. In ER research, actually there are abundant studies that have examined the role of extensive reading in improving students' reading attitudes. And I think in generally speaking, there is a consensus that extensive reading program enhanced students' reading attitude. Okay. So another focus of this study is an extensive reading program, the effect of extensive reading program on various aspects of language abilities. There are a lot of studies, right, that have shown ER benefited different aspects of language abilities. Okay. There are a few meta-analysis studies, for example, by Question, Kim, Nakahashi, Zhong and Day, Wang and King. After reviewing the literature, I think the gap, there are mainly 2 gaps. The first one is, as I have just mentioned, there are not many extensive reading studies in less commonly taught languages. Yesterday, Jeff, I think, they reported a study in Japanese as a foreign language context. That's great. So I hope there are more studies in less commonly taught languages, for example, Chinese. And another gap is there are not many studies that examine students' perceptions of extensive reading activities. Okay. So that's those are 2 gaps of the current ER research. So this study has 3 research questions. First one is, what differences are observed in reading attitudes before and after the ER program among a group of Chinese as a foreign language students, learners? And another question is, which aspects of Chinese language abilities were perceived to have been improved by 1 semesters of ER program? I want to mention that the ER program I established has been run for 3 years. And this study is reporting 1 semester's data. And third research question is, what were out to Chinese readers' perceptions of the ER activities? So the participants were 41 Chinese as a foreign language learners in an American liberal arts college. And the average years of learning Chinese ranged from 0.5, half a semester, to 14 years. That's a huge range, with a mean of 4 years. The participants were all enrolled in intermediate level Chinese classes. So I want to briefly talk about the context. So in the ER program, we require students to read books, 1 book per week for intermediate Chinese class. And the ER component is 5% of the final grade. And I established an extensive reading library with 200 books. So this was back in 2018. And now there are more books, and we are also using online libraries, for example, Chairman's Bao and Mandarin Beans. I presented yesterday, and I discussed about the online platforms we use. And I also designed online reading website for students. So students are required to read both in and after class, and they complete ER activities per week for the book they read. The books are published by some publishing houses. For example, it's called Hanyu Feng, and there are a few others. So basically, Tuesday, I give students 10 minutes to read in class. And Wednesday, I give them 5 minutes to read in class. And Thursday, we do the activities from the book they read this week. Okay, and I encourage them to read on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And on Thursday, students check out a new book for next week. Okay, so every Thursday is, return book and check out a new book. Okay. So for each week, there is extensive reading activity. And those activities were adopted or adapted from Dr. Day, Benford, and Day's book. Those activities might be very familiar to you. So week 2, it's an instant book report. Week 3, gifts. Week 4, it's a grammar activity. Week 5, vocabulary activity. Week 6, different ending. Week 9, listening while reading. Week 10, story and me. Week 11, the story and the drawing. Week 12, student write their own stories. And week 13 is my reflections. So now I want to report the results of the study. So first research question is, what differences are observed in reading attitudes before and after the ER program? The questionnaire we used was adopted from Zhou and Day 2021 study. That questionnaire was designed by Dr. Day. So we have a pre-questionnaire and post-questionnaire. So the first thing we did was to run a factorial analysis since we are adopting a component view approach. So through the factorial analysis, we identified 5 factors of reading attitude. They are confidence, enjoyment, interest, practical value, and devotion. We run a repeated measures MANOVA, which shows that time, reading attitude, and the interaction between time and the reading attitude variables were all significant. There were significant differences. Okay, and we can see that. And then we run a post hoc analysis, and devotion was a significant factor, which means students are significantly different when we compare the pre and post reading attitude in terms of devotion. Devotion here means they said they want to devote more time into reading in Chinese, and they want to devote more time in learning Chinese language. The second research question is, which aspects of Chinese language were perceived to have been improved by the 1 semester's ER program? To answer this research question, we asked interview questions, and in the reflection, week 13 reflection, we asked some open-ended questions. So the results are from those data sources. So according to this table, students reported their reading speed, reading comprehension, vocabulary, grammar, writing, character and word inferencing, character recognition. Those 2 are specifically related to Chinese language. Listening and speaking were all improved. Okay. Number here means the frequency. So how many times the participants mentioned reading speed, has been improved. So to summarize research question 2, we can say that the students perceived different aspects of their language abilities have been improved. And the research question 3 is, what were L2 Chinese readers' perceptions of the ER activities? Okay? We categorized their perceptions into 3 categories: enjoy, sometimes enjoy, not enjoy. So we can see that 70% of the participants think that they enjoyed the ER activities, and 15% didn't. And we also coded the reasons why students enjoyed extensive reading activities. There are 5 reasons. First one is providing opportunities to interact with classmates. If you can recall, on every Thursday, students do extensive reading activities. They complete extensive reading activity, and on Thursday, they discuss and share and interact with their classmates. And students also mentioned that extensive reading activities solidified their reading comprehension. And students also like the fact that the activities are different each week. And they also said that ER activities are different from normal class activities, which might be boring because we teach vocabulary first and then grammar, and then we do the reading passages. And some students mentioned that extensive reading activities force them to read. Okay. So those are 2 quotes from students who said they enjoyed extensive reading activities. Okay, the first one said they were more interactive because in the group we could look at the pictures or change the ending and appreciate the creativity of the presenters. In another quote, some students said they love the activities because they think activities helped them improve listening and speaking skills, right? Okay. So I also cited 2 quotes where students mentioned they don't like extensive reading activities. So first one said, sometimes, because we need to finish every day's, teaching activities, and on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, especially on Thursday, we shared the extensive reading activities in class. So students mentioned that sometimes they think it was rushed and disorganized, and some students were not very engaged. Okay. And also we didn't have enough time to correct each other on things we said. And another student said, I do not enjoy doing ER activities because they cannot look up words while we're reading our books. So next, I want to discuss the findings. So first one, the effects of ER on reading attitude among a group of Chinese as a foreign language learners. We can say that 1 semester of ER significantly improved the students' reading attitude, especially they are more willing to devote more time and energy and effort into reading and learning Chinese language. Okay. The second focus of the study is language abilities perceived to be improved. So students mentioned different aspects of language abilities, and some are specifically related to Chinese language. For example, Chinese character recognition and the character inferencing. So I think the reason behind is most of the activities, extensive reading activities, require them to write in Chinese. For example, different endings, gifts to the main characters, or their own stories. So I think that's why students feel their writing ability has been improved. And the students also shared the books they read and activities with their classmates on Thursday, so which provided them more opportunities to practice listening and speaking. So the next focus of the study is students' perceptions of ER activities. So 70% of the participants think that extensive reading enjoyed ER activities. Through reviewing the literature, we can say that actually reading with activities, it's quite common, and reading supplemented with activities leads to better linguistic gains and retention than reading only approach. Okay. And the reading with ER activities reported in this study was similar to enhanced ER. Okay. So enhanced ER was a concept mentioned in Song and Sadgana 2014 study, which found that reading with ER activities led to more incidental learning of both productive and receptive knowledge. Okay. So the implication of the study is we do encourage incorporating ER activities in ER programs. There are some limitations, and I also want to briefly mention about future direction. I expect more studies on ER in other less commonly taught languages. It was great that in the past 2 days, I watched presentations in Japanese as a foreign language and French as a foreign language. That's great. We all know that we want more experimental control design studies, but I found it very difficult. So for example, in my institution, or sessions of, for example, intermediate Chinese have to have the same components of the syllabus. Students cannot receive different treatments. So it might be hard in real situations. Okay. This study again has, it's mainly based on interview and questionnaire data. And I hope in the future I can the data were collected 2 years ago, and in the past 2 years, I collected more data using tests. For example, reading fluency test, vocabulary test, character recognition test, and the reading comprehension test. Yes. So those are some of the studies I published. Most of them are on ER, and some of the others are on reading in Chinese as a foreign language. Thank you so much. That's my presentation.